Good morning. This is you. Okay, great. I see the recording has been started, so we'll go ahead. So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar in the series Innovative Public Procurement in Action, Exploring Instruments for Urban Transformation. And today we'll explore the instrument Competitive Dialogue. So my name is Sarah Nyberg, and I will be your host today. I'm a senior specialist in sustainable infrastructure in cities at the company South Pole. I'm a project manager, and I'm mainly working in the EU-funded project URBREATH, which is about implementing nature-based solutions in 9 European cities and beyond. And I will speak a bit more about URBREATH soon for any external joiners. First, some housekeeping for the webinar. Please be muted unless you want to ask a question or contribute to the discussion after the presentations. You can choose yourself if you want to have your camera on or off. It's nice to see some faces, to see if you're following along and to see your reactions. But since we're recording this session and we'll share it publicly afterwards, I understand if you might not want to have your camera on. So the objective of this webinar is that you will learn about the instrument Competitive Dialogue, and that we can discuss and have an exchange about it to learn from each other and how it can be applied. And the structure of the webinar is the following. So first we have an introduction and the context of today's webinar. Then we'll have a technical deep dive by Francesco Molinari to understand the instrument. Then we'll have time for your questions. So note them down if you have any questions during the presentation, and we'll make our best to respond to your questions. After that, we'll have an interactive part to discuss the pros, the cons, and the relevance of the instrument for NBS procurement in cities. Then we'll finish with a summary, final remarks, and an outlook for the coming sessions. Let's see, I hear some, sorry, I'm just going to mute a participant here. So before we dive into the instrument, I want to give you a bit of a background and context for this webinar. So I will share my screen here. Great. I believe you should be able to see my screen. So about URBREATH, which this webinar series is organized by. So what is URBREATH? What is the project about? So I'll give you a first overview to start with. So it's a groundbreaking initiative co-founded by the EU. It's setting the stage for a new era for urban planning. It's poised to revolutionize urban landscapes, and we want to harness the full potential of nature-based solutions, so NBS, across diverse climate zones, and we want to foster community engagement and knowledge sharing. In the project, we have 4 front-runner pilot cities and 5 follower pilot cities. I will detail which they are quite soon. The project is co-creation based, or also like the projects being implemented, the nature-based solutions. So we want to have inputs from different stakeholders. We're also developing NBS implementation assistance tools. And we all who support this, we are a multidisciplinary international consortium. So who are we? Which organizations are we in this consortium? I'll show that in a bit. Then just also the project, also some key facts about the project. The long and beautiful title is, bear with me, Systemic Integration of Transformative Technical and Nature-Based Solutions to Improve Climate Neutrality of European Cities and Regions and Tackle Climate Change, the URBREATH approach. So yeah, the core is really to implement nature-based solutions, and then we have different angles to it. We have local living labs with stakeholder engagement. We have different technical tools like climate modeling and digital twins, for example, to enable more nature-based solutions. And so, yeah, the topic is demonstration of climate mitigation and resilience solutions in support of the implementation of the adaptation to climate change and cities missions, which is a big EU initiative. And you see the detailed title of those missions in the dark blue box. The duration of the project is 4 to 8 months, so 4 years. So it started last year in January and will go until December 2027. It's funded through the Horizon Europe funding scheme. And if you don't know Horizon Europe, it's for, in short, for research and innovation projects for more like sustainable Europe. Yeah, here's the budget, quite high. And in the consortium are 37 partnering organizations, which we see on the next slide. So the coordinator is the Lisbon Council. Then we have several research institutions and universities, where Francesco is with the Polytechnic University of Milan, but also affiliated with the Lisbon Council. And then I will not go through all of them, but you can see it here. You also find this information on the URBREATH website. We have a public agency, we have some large enterprises, some small and medium-sized enterprises, where South Pole, where I work, as you see in the logo, is one of them. We have some non-profit organizations and networks, and then we have the frontrunner cities Madrid, Leuven, Tallinn, Cluj-Napoca, and the follower cities Athens, Parma, Aarhus, Gaiani, and Pilsen. So yeah, so what's the motivation for the URBREATH project? Why are we doing this project? It's basically to tackle some issues, some challenges that we need to address. First, we have an ongoing urbanization going on in Europe. So in 2021, 75% of Europe's population lived in cities, a big share. And this number is expected to increase to 84% in 2050. So, of course, we want to make sure that we have a nice place where we live, since many people live in cities. We want to focus on cities to make sure that they are good places to live in. Secondly, cities are at the forefront of climate change. Cities are affected by frequent and extreme weather events. I'm sure all of you have experienced really hot summers this summer, or you have read about it, or you have in other ways experienced the climate change. Urban areas are particularly vulnerable to climate change, such as floodings. It's a lot of hard surfaces, runoff is limited, and then that can create floodings. And cities have a high need in energy supply. Cities need 75% of global primary energy consumption, and they cause 50 to 60% of total greenhouse gases. Sorry, it should be emissions, not emotions. Third, so yeah, we have them. There are many solutions, of course, to tackle these challenges, but one of them is nature-based solutions as a climate adaptation measure. And how to implement them then. So conventional approaches of revitalization, regeneration, and greening planning tend to fail. Because they focus mainly on cost-profit criteria with simplistic methodologies. They do not deliver adequate return on investment. For example, as opposite to climate mitigation technologies like renewable energy, you produce electricity, you sell that electricity, you get some money. However, when you're planting a tree, you don't get, it's not like money growing on a tree, like you don't get any money for it. So therefore, we need to look in innovative approaches to financing and procuring the nature-based solutions. And secondly, a challenge is that there traditionally has been no or not much focus on local communities' needs, leading to low adoption rates of the solutions. So that's another reason to take a new approach. So that's why we do a lot of stakeholder participation in URBREATH to really consider the local community's needs to hopefully have higher adoption rates of nature-based solutions. So which are the pilots then? So I mentioned them briefly before, but we see here the Mediterranean climate zone. Oh yeah, so the cities are divided into 4 climate zones. So one is the Mediterranean climate zone, which you see in the blue in the bottom of the map. So here we have the frontrunner city, Madrid in Spain, and the follower cities, Athens in Greece and Parma in Italy. Then we have the boreal climate zones, so Northern Europe basically, with the frontrunner city Tallinn in Estonia and the follower city Kajaani in Finland. Third, we have the Atlantic climate zone here in orange, where we have the frontrunner city Leuven in Belgium and the follower city Aarhus in Denmark. And last but not least, we have the continental zone, climate zone, here depicted in green, where we have the frontrunner city Cluj-Napoca in Romania and the follower city Pilsen in the Czech Republic. So what is our expected impact then? The first big topic is climate change mitigation and adaptation. So decreasing the carbon footprint and pollution of the urban areas. For example, also, since like trees, when you plant more trees, they take up CO2. Secondly, it's to boost resilience of the European urban areas towards climate change related hazards such as heat waves, heat bubbles, and flooding. For example, when you plant more trees, you have more shade, it's more moist, and that provides cooling. Also, soils take up water and prevent flooding. Third is to safeguard biodiversity and enhance public health and well-being. So if we have more plants, that creates a larger biodiversity, attracts more different insects, and we enhance the public health because we just feel good when we are in a park or when we like closer to greenery, where it's like more our natural environments, if you look like at the evolution, as opposite to being like in concrete buildings. The second big area of expected impact is trust and engagement. So we want to increase the trust in democratic institutions, increasing the involvement of citizens in the decision-making processes. And secondly, to enhance the policy decision-making processes of urban greening and renaturing for urban regeneration, resilience, and climate neutrality. And so, going over a bit to coming closer to today's topic. So one of the topics for URBREATH is procurement, and more specifically to develop a collaborative procurement framework, which we believe is better than just the normal procurement procedures. So to give you an overview, first, so while most cities follow standard procurement procedures, there are options to reduce cost, increase innovation, and have more sustainable projects by using collaborative, holistic procurement models. So what do we mean by this? So collaborative means that it involves stakeholders from the start of a project or process, and in this case, the procurement process. And holistic is to start with your end goal in mind and consider the entire life cycle of the project, from the design and planning to implementation and ongoing maintenance. And note that there are procurement rules which need to be followed, but there is room for innovative approaches, and especially for those which the EU has described, which I will have on the second slide in the box number 2. But first, we'll look a bit closer to this co-creation aspect of the collaborative holistic procurement framework. So we are using and we try to implement a participatory design of NB solutions. We include citizens and other stakeholders so that they can take better ownership, and the public works together with the inhabitants or with companies instead of just buying something. And then the second pillar, where we're getting closer to today's topic, is the procurement implementation and the different innovative approaches to it. And here we have these 5, and are the 5 topics of the 5 webinars in this webinar series. So last week we heard about the preliminary market consultation. Today it will be all about the competitive dialogue. Then in the coming weeks, we'll go through competitive procedure with negotiation, innovation partnerships, and pre-commercial procurement. And the third pillar of this framework is innovative approaches to financing, because of course procurement and financing are closely connected. To procure something, you need to pay for it, and you need to have, therefore, the money for it. And some aspects here, which I will not go into the details, but I'm just mentioning them. So some innovative approaches here for financing are to highlight returns and using it for proposals. Secondly, you can combine and bundle the NBS projects with commercial financeable sub-projects. You can try reducing the costs, and you can combine sources and forms for innovative financing. So that was the end of my introduction to today's topic. So yeah, we hope that you not only will learn about and discuss these innovative approaches, but encourage you to also apply them in your contexts. So yeah, let's go ahead with the second instrument of this webinar series, and which is competitive dialogue. So I give the word to Francesco Molinari.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. I'm starting to share my slides. Today, I don't know why, but it's not the usual look and feel. Maybe because
agree with the teams. They have introduced some new functions. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm not able to share the presentation. It doesn't allow me.
Oh, Marina, can you check? Can you give Francesco availability to share his screen?
Let me see.
Yes.
See, meanwhile, I see Paweł Kaczkan shared a message, a promotion about dialogue on city procurement. So there seems to be a webinar tomorrow. So feel free to check out that while we're making sure that Francesco can share his screen. And if not, I got your presentation, Francesco.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
I think we can do that to save time. It's
yeah.
not.
Okay. Yeah.
It is
Just give me.
Yeah.
Just give me some moments, then I will make sure that I can open it. I'll open it. Try a bit further meanwhile, but yeah. It's loading on my side at least. Okay, still not working for you, Francesco? If so, I'll go ahead and share my screen.
Yeah, please go ahead. I tried multiple times.
Okay. Yeah. So there you go. See window, and we have this one. Okay. Just say next when I switch.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining the meeting, the webinar today. I prepared a few slides to inspire you. Please go to the next one, which is the hopefully most inspiring slide of all. With this cup of coffee, it's Monday morning, and we are in the process of realizing this. So my best wishes to you and your weeks, and a short reminder of the three goals of this presentation. As Sarah said, we are narrowing the focus today on this instrument, the competitive dialogue, on which I will propose a list of pros and cons with a specific reference to the main topic and area of interest of the URBREATH project, the procurement of nature-based solutions. I will also provide few examples, hopefully to ignite a Monday morning discussion among the participants in this webinar. Next. Why this inspiration to put together innovative procurement and nature-based solutions? Some of these slides are in common to my previous presentation on the preliminary market consultation, which I did last Monday. I will keep on using them just to show the variety of possible solutions, and also, next slide, the difficulty in replicating what worked well in some area. We tend to speak of front runner or leading cities or pilot areas, having in mind that what worked well in one area, one pilot site, one city, can be replicable and replicated relatively easy in other areas named follower cities, follower sites, and so on. But this is far from obvious. And one of the suggestions this entire webinar cycle would like to make to all of you is to think in terms of the potential of innovative procurement for the sake of this transfer to be facilitated and ultimately made possible. I will be back on that later. Next slide. So competitive dialogue. Here I put the picture and in very small characters the reference to a guide which is not new but still very inspiring on what the mindset can be of people involved in the design and implementation of a competitive dialogue. Typically, there are two typologies of civil servants engaged in this procedure: those working full-time for the procurement office. For them, speaking at the level of this webinar would be too little, because they know far more than I do on the technicalities of the competitive dialogue. But then there is another category of civil servants, those thematically involved, for example, in the domain of nature-based solutions, working for other departments of a city. For them, the initial level of knowledge may not be the same, and therefore I hope to ignite some interest, at least in this second category of people. The starting point, the legal basis for this instrument, is an article of the European Directive on Public Procurement of 2014. Actually, the competitive dialogue was introduced by the previous directive 10 years before, and it is commonly used in all those cases where the contracting authority has a problem before starting to launch the tender procedure. They cannot define the technical, financial, or legal aspects of the solutions they are looking for because of the generic level of knowledge they are in possession of, because of the rapid advances of technology, innovation, and so on, because of the wide variety of possibilities which are in the state-of-the-art solutions they know about. For these reasons, and maybe others, the concept behind the competitive dialogue, as the two words combined say, is to ignite a procedure that is at the same time competitive, that is, it involves concurrently a number of potential suppliers in a competitive environment, stimulating them to participate and do their best to win the competition. But also, and at the same time, and before landing into the submission of a set of offers from which to select the best one, the instrument is a lot about establishing a dialogue with these potential bidders, a dialogue finalized to refine and deepen the initial level of knowledge about the possible features of the desired solutions. This is why the instrument looks interesting to me in the context of nature-based solutions, where it is usually quite difficult to come up with a predefined set of specifications for the solutions we are looking for, or coming up with a predefined set of specifications, it is often the case that the results are not aligned with the original expectations, because the set of specifications was too rigid, and when the technical offers come in, it is too late to realize there was something to adjust and ask them to resubmit again. Next. So how it works? Very simply, it works in 4 steps plus 1, which is the tendering phase. The first step is about launching a call for competition, preparing it and launching it. This is a lot about defining the perimeter of your conceptual problem, the typology of nature-based solutions you would like to commission, what in jargon we name minimum requirements, some essential elements that must be there to identify what we are talking about. If it is about flood prevention, it is quite likely that there will be some minimum requirements concerning the technical aspects of the solutions we are looking for. There can be prescriptions in terms of materials, in terms of exclusion or inclusion of certain typologies of products or materials. At this stage, the call for competition already mentioned that after the dialogue, of which I will tell you in an instant, there will be the proper competition, the proper submission of technical proposals accompanied by a prize, and therefore the award of at least one winning solution, as the law says. The second stage is the stage of selection. In practice, the call for competition has a first stage during which we do not yet speak of what we want to buy or what we want to discuss before buying, but we limit ourselves as contracting authorities to identify a bunch of potential suppliers, typically by asking any economic operator being interested in participating in this competition to present a set of credentials, for example, lists of past similar works, services that they may have already performed in the same area or in a related area, indications of turnovers and so on. This may lead to the short listing of some economic operators, the law speaks of a minimum number of 3, but of course this is discretional, who will become the protagonists of the following stage, number 3, which is the proper dialogue, competitive dialogue. During this third stage, what happens is that each economic operator that has been shortlisted presents a first proposal, which is used to start a discussion. The discussion is not does not follow a single and recommended way, structure. It may take. Can you hear
yeah,
me?
we see you. The video was paused for a bit, but I see and hear you.
Now I cannot see the shared slides anymore.
Oh.
We can see them.
Okay. Now
But
I can.
guess it's in. Now you can. Okay, Francesco sees him as well. Okay, good.
Okay. So I was saying that there is no single and recommended structure for this dialogue. What the law says is that privacy and business confidentiality must be protected at all times. So we can configure hypothetically this dialogue as a collection of bilateral talks during which every participant presents the proposal, receives advice, and goes home to make changes to the initially presented collection of ideas or solutions. But this is just one possibility. As I will show you in my examples, the competitive dialogue is seen as an instrument which nicely fits into a concept of stakeholder engagement and civic participation, which is also peculiar to the URBREATH vision of public procurement as something that engages relevant entities from the local area, for example, in the definition of the priorities for climate mitigation or adaptation actions. What happens in reality is that in a number of cases, the contents of these proposals, or at least the public parts of those contents, the parts of those contents that can be shared publicly without breaking any constraint in terms of business confidentiality or protection of intellectual knowledge, they are further discussed with the contribution of citizens and other relevant stakeholders. This is not specifically part of this procedure as you see it in front of you, but in practice it is something that happens, and I think it's a nice add-on to the main process. Once the dialogue is finalized, the buyer says, okay, guys, it's all over. Based on the results of this interaction, the initially identified requirements are, of course, improved, and a set of specifications for the tender phase are identified. The bidders are informed and they can prepare their own proposals, which will be evaluated normally according to the so-called most economically advantageous principle, MEAT principle, which means best ratio between quality and price. Next. Interestingly, the competitive dialogue positions itself between the planning and the tendering phases of public procurement. Already during the previous webinar, we discussed about a hypothetical procurement cycle focused on three phases: the planning, the tendering, and the implementation of awarded contracts. The competitive dialogue stays in between for the reason that, of course, there must be a contract notice to start the procedure. So we are already in the tendering phase. But due to its nature, the way I described it to you, it is in some way an instrument that allows revising or refining the original results of the planning phase in terms of definition of needs, requirements, scope, even budget. And so it is a sort of cycle in the cycle, which quite interestingly, in the next slide, we can compare with the preliminary market consultation. For those of you who were in the previous webinar, the preliminary market consultation was an instrument not having connection with a specific tender. There was even the recommendation, that the legal requirement, not to disclose any details of the future call for tender to the participants in the preliminary market consultation. So the cycle in this case was just based on a face-to-face interaction or virtual interaction between the procurers and the prospective participants in future calls for the purpose of exchanging knowledge and information on what is happening around, what's new on the market, in the research community, and so on. In the competitive dialogue, the tendering phase is included for the fundamental reason that at the end of the dialogue, there is the obligation, not just the option, for the procurer to finalize the procedure with an award. And this is the main difference that the two pictures document. There are also a number of points in common. For example, both procedures must respect transparency, inclusiveness, parity of treatment, and other general principles of procurement law. Both may have issues with business confidentiality, the tension between disclosing the details of received proposals publicly, including for the sake of respecting transparency and parity of treatment, and the tension with the other necessity of protecting some aspects of innovation which the proposers do not want to share externally. So this is the main difference between the two instruments. Next. So to summarize this first part, we can consider these 4 points as relevant for a reflection on what the competitive dialogue can do for the sake of procurement of nature-based solutions. It certainly helps to clarify vaguely described needs when the planning phase is over, because it allows buyers to go deeper into those needs before finalizing the commissioning phase, the tendering phase in the sense of commissioning. Second point, encourages diversification, avoiding vendor lock-in, which is also present or potentially present in the context of nature-based solutions, when the same old techniques or technologies are routinely adopted, overlooking the progress in the innovation community. It may help reduce the execution risks for the awarded tenders, because the winning solution, there is a specificity in the law, can be further negotiated after its award to reduce or improve aspects that affect the technical or the financial risks, even after the award of the solution. And finally, for the mention I already did of its integration with participatory processes, it can support a broader engagement of citizens and stakeholders. Next. Historically, like I said, the competitive dialogue was adopted after the first directive of 2004 into the national legislations of procurement, and in the 5 years between 2004 and 2009, it knew an unprecedented growth with more than 3,000 cases. Now the situation has stabilized, but as a quick analysis of what happens, for example, on TED, the online supplement to the European Journal of dedicated to public procurement, most of the projects that are launched with this instrument are projects of high complexity. Next. This is the this is the text of the directive Article 30, which I will not do for the sake of time. So I kindly ask Sarah to go through the next 3 or 4 slides, but I take the opportunity to mention that the slides will be made publicly available for downloading. The conclusion of the second part is that we have stressed a couple of times the issue of variety in the domain of nature-based solutions based on the description and especially the provisions of legislation on competitive dialogue. There are several ways in which this variety can be potentially accommodated by the competitive dialogue instrument. First, the objectives and the award criteria are fixed, but the requirements, like I said, can be modified along the way. This leaves room for a discovery process, which is realized across the dialogue, importing new and innovative technical solutions into the picture, into the scenario. Second element, during the dialogue, the initial number of solutions and/or suppliers can be reduced and optimized. The law says we can start maybe with 5 of them and then downsize to 3. Or we can discuss and therefore modify some of the proposals because there are overlaps, or we recognize elements of convergence and we use them to simplify the picture, excluding from the discussion some that show less potential than others. It is very open, provided it is done under the umbrella of the general principles I was mentioning earlier, parity of treatment and so on. There is also the provision for awarding more than one solution, at least in principle, that is, if the budget allows, and the aspect must be specifically mentioned in the call. Finally, as I said, the winning solution can be further negotiated, although not in a transformative fashion. The end of the competitive dialogue cannot lead to a radical change in the substantial aspects of the tender which were mentioned in the call. It cannot become something else. We might change some particular specifications, but not the fundamental orientation of the call. Next. This example does not belong to the domain of nature-based solutions, but I liked it because it shows a very nice diagram describing the process. Starts with the advertising of specifications, and then it goes to the submission from the economic operators of a request to participate, and continues with the short listing, and then the invitation to take part in the dialogue, the submission of the preliminary versions of the proposals, the dialogue itself, the update of the initial proposals, the final proposals, and then the evaluation and the award decision. It is nice because it is descriptive, and it also shows the process of downsizing, in this case, the number of participants during the initial selection phase. You see some of them were dropped, while the number of participants to the dialogue has been kept identical. And only one was awarded in this case. Next. To summarize the benefits and the risks. Benefits can include better specifications and more realistic budgets at the end of the process, encouragement of innovation and the adoption of new solutions, reduction of the procurement risks, improvement of competition and access for SMEs to procedures like this, trust building with suppliers but also with citizens and stakeholders, can lead to more than one contract award. On the other side, it is a time and resource-intensive process requiring strong governance capacity. It must be finalized, so differently from the preliminary market consultation, we cannot easily change our mind during the process. It is also true that the narrative about improving the initial proposals along the way should be a bit revised based on experience. Suppliers are often reluctant to make dramatic changes even after the recommendation received, because it is, of course, something they know best, and it is also for them a time and resource-consuming process. There can be tensions between transparency and business confidentiality. And finally, if parity of treatment is mismanaged, some legal issues may come up. Next. Now, a couple of examples, specifically from the area of nature-based solutions. Like I said, the way this instrument is used has a lot to do with complex projects, and a category of complex projects is certainly the rebuilding or profound renovation of existing areas of a city. This example comes from Liège in Belgium. After the unsuccessful bid the city did to host the International Exposition of 2017, they had this district which was open to renovation and the search for alternative uses, and it became an eco-district, an ecological district with a huge financial investment of more than 300 million euros, and also a lot of experimentations of nature-based solutions along the way. The instrument of competitive dialogue facilitated the identification and the refinement of the nature-based solutions disseminated across this ecological district as a fundamental component of it, and they also helped the city administration to formulate better specifications for the solutions they were looking for. Next. This other example comes from the city of Hamburg. There is an area in the middle of the city, south of the Elbe River, which is being again renovated and destined to several distinct uses of the space. In collaboration with local stakeholders and especially citizens, a competitive dialogue has made it possible to not only compare received proposals. There were 3 distinct groups that were shortlisted and formulated their proposals, but also to embed in the next versions of those proposals the opinions, the structured opinions collected from the citizens of Hamburg and their residents in the area. What you see on the right-hand side of this slide is the booklet which was created to launch the procedure. Normally, what the law itself says is that together with the call for competitive dialogue, the procurer should prepare, maybe not that nice, but at least a structured description of the as-is situation that the participants, the shortlisted participants, can use to formulate their own proposals. This is something you can get and download following the link provided. Next.
I believe it's the discussion, but first we can have a Q&A.
Yes,
I guess.
okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah, since I'm showing now, we didn't include the Q&A slide, but I can show this one. Yeah, so yeah, thank you very much, Francesco, for presenting and sharing everything about competitive dialogue. So yeah, I think all of us have learned something today. Now I'd like to open the floor for any questions you might have. So if you have any questions, just raise your hand, just speak out. You can also write in the chat, depending on what's possible for you. Yeah, so please just go ahead and ask any questions about the delivered content. Yeah, Max.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah and Francesco. Yeah, for me, I'm just wondering to what extent this is already, to me, this process is quite, and I'm quite familiar, like I'm not a procurement specialist, but I'm familiar that this is a way of working that, I know, for example, Amsterdam is doing on a day-to-day basis. But I don't know to what extent this is, yeah, to what extent other cities are surprised to hear that this is the way of working, or that this is something they already do. You know what I mean? So I was wondering, is this all new for people, or yeah?
Yeah, good point, Max. I think we should ask other colleagues in this room. What do you think, Sarah? We could open the chat box, for example, to comments. If there is anyone wanting to tell us how new this narrative is for them, or how familiar they are, like in the case of Max. There is, while you are thinking, there is one more subtle point, which is the reason why we are talking about competitive dialogue today, and in the coming events we will speak about other instruments. For sure, in the case of the competitive dialogue, I'm not completely sure the full potential for nature-based solutions has been exploited so far. I see preference going to complex projects like an urban renovation project. Certainly is full of aspects that is quite hard to preside over all at once, may require very complex and articulated proposals, also for the evaluation. For this purpose, it is certainly routine, as you said, Max, for many cities. But now think of the complexity of even a small-sized investment in nature-based solutions, like in the examples I provided initially in my slide. So something very localized, which in any case may have a number of hidden issues in terms of micro decisions to be taken to decide whether certain technology for pavements rather than restoration of wetland should be given preference to. I'm not sure that the state of the art has any example. I will be curious. If you have suggestions, I would be happy to hear. And so from those examples, I think we might build a very nice narrative, which is in line with the main objectives of the URBREATH project, which is a lot about putting together procurement and nature-based solutions. You raised your hand again, Max, or it was by mistake?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to guide the question again to the city. So so maybe Laura, Marilis, like I saw a lot of cities in the call. Like I don't know to what extent is this, because I know you are not procurement professionals, or maybe correct me if I'm wrong. But is this process for you new, or this
I can
approach?
say Laura wrote, and then I see Powell has raised his hand. Laura wrote, so from Leuven in Belgium, she wrote, I'm not directly involved in a lot of procurement procedures and as it is for more complex solutions, I think it is not used that much. I think there was one file like this in our department last year. So, okay, yeah. Yeah. And as we heard in the presentation, like there were, Francesco said, like there have been more than 5,000 cases, but quite few applied so far nature-based solutions. But yeah, I'll let Powell say something.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for your great presentations. I really like it. And this approach, and coming back to the question about the dialogue, the competitive dialogue and general dialogues when it comes to cities context, what I can add from my perspective as I'm working in net zero cities, to me it depends on situation. So I really like Laura Den's reply about the complexity of solutions, but why it's actually from my side, my perspective, I think the biggest problem with using competitive procedures and dialogue as a whole process, I think, is a kind of potential fear from being accused of conflict of interest sometimes, at least in I would say Eastern and Central Europe. Definitely, I feel that because I used to work for 15 years in procurement audits. So I think that this is potential barrier to me in terms of using dialogue as a whole process, as I said. So I can see clearly that there's a huge room for that, for promotion dialogue, because dialogue is very helpful, as you describe both. So in different areas, especially when we think about climate change solutions, NBSs, etc. So thanks for that. And just one short note, just I posted on the chat for tomorrow another webinar, so you join, free to join, so you are very welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Powell. Thanks for sharing your expertise and knowledge. Let's see, we have one has raised, oh yeah, that would be Max next.
Yeah, just from my understanding, because that's also just, this is for me from the living lag perspective, because how I see this kind of this tool of like competitive dialogue when you need innovation from the market, right? For me it also stands in, to what extent in friction or in conflict, I also with a kind of high not fully, but it could stand in conflict with kind of a very co-creative kind of stakeholder engagement approach, because I think when you do that, when you go into the stakeholder process, you define very clearly what the challenges of a specific site, be it human, natural, etc., that you analyze that to the detail, and also that you, together with different stakeholders in the Living Lab process and the citizens, have defined also kind of what direction you want to take further also in the solutions fair. Then to me, like maybe a competitive dialogue is not per se the approach to take, as to what are the solutions that are coming out of these processes as innovative, or are they just addressing the needs of the stakeholders involved? Are they as risky as a competitive dialogue should need? So I do feel, I wonder if the nature-based solutions, and especially for the projects that I am aware of that we are going to realize in the cities part of URBREATH, are actually will benefit as much from this way of working, because I think we have seen already that we have seen already in a lot of cities that sometimes citizen engagement or study engagements was actually was done in the past, or was not as as high intensively followed, and they actually left the solution more like in my opinion to the procurement process. So we saying like, but this is the challenge of this specific site, come up with a design and a solution, for example from architecture or natural architecture firms, and they kind of design the solution based on the question of the municipality. So my point is yeah, do we actually, if we look at the specific cities and the specific challenge and the specific sites that we've had and the process that we've gone through, does competitive dialogue offer, or do we need competitive dialogue actually? That's my question. And I don't know the answer, but my direction is maybe not, or maybe only for aspects of the solution.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe I can bring up the pros and cons slide again. And Francesca wants to comment something on what Max said, or if any other participants, what do you think about the potential if it's needed? And since NBS projects, they can be big and complex, but NBS project can also be smaller. So in that case, maybe it's not needed. However, that doesn't have to be an argument against, just because it has been used for complex projects before. That doesn't have to be an argument against using it for smaller, simpler projects. But yeah, Francesco, I see you unmuted. Do you want to comment something?
Maybe the best answer will come after the fifth and last of these webinars, for one fundamental reason that is not sufficiently clear now that we are in the middle of the second one only. There is a common aspect that cuts across the 5 instruments, which is the strong dialoguing element between procurer and supplier. This is something that normally the basic and best known instruments of procurement do not allow, because the specifications are published once and forever. During the period that the call is published, there is little way to interact, and in any case, what is published, cannot be modified. And when the evaluation of received proposals can be done, it's time to do it, I bet with you that on top of selecting the best value for money, the best proposal or proposals as winners of the competition, the evaluation committee members always have a sort of bitter taste, because the winning proposals are certainly comparatively better than the others, but they still do not make it in full to comply with what the original expectations of the procurers were about. So my point here is that you can name it preliminary market consultations. If you were there, Max, at the previous webinar, you may remember what it was about. You can name it competitive dialogue. You can name it, otherwise we will speak about further instruments in the coming Mondays. But a common element of all of these is that discussing and improving the quality of proposals in the interest of the procurer is possible, is legal, can be done transparently, can be done proficiently during and not after or before the tendering process. Can you still hear? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It was away for a microsecond, but we heard you completely. Yeah.
So my point is, the competitive dialogue is just one of a group of 5 distinct instruments. The purpose of this webinar and the other webinars is to inform you about the existence of these instruments if you didn't know about that before. If you do, because they are commonly part of your experience, then my next and last intention would be to try and speak of the benefits that these instruments can bring because of this possibility of interim discussion to improve the quality of the final outputs and outcomes of any tender, especially when it is about nature-based solutions. I don't know if I answered, Max, to your concern.
Yeah, no, totally. So I think it is a way of informing people of what possibilities exist, and they can themselves decide if it specifically to their case study could be relevant or interesting. So thanks a lot. That makes clear to me. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, good. Also, I also wanted to say that exactly like there are more other innovative approaches, and all might not be applicable. You can use one, perhaps 2 in combination, and then then you just see what fits. And so, as we have 2 contributions in the chat, Powell wrote a couple of minutes ago that he agrees on what was said then. So transparency during the dialogue processes. So competitive dialogue in all dialogues is crucial for public procurers. Yeah, so transparency is important. And Martina from Pilsen in Czech Republic wrote more recently to Max that they're currently undergoing innovative procurement under the umbrella of the Climaboro project, which is a Horizon Europe project. And yes, there are not many examples of innovative procurement in our country, so in Czech Republic. According to the Czech Technology Association, and there she provided a link, as of 2022, there were 33 IPPs run in the country. I guess that's innovation procurement, though Martina cannot tell how many were NBS focused. Yeah, thank you for sharing, Martina. Do you want to add something orally? Or I thought I heard a voice. Feel free to say if you want to say something orally, but if not, then not. Yeah, cool. Nice. IPPs. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Okay, cool. Do we have any other questions, like in general about the presentation or in something specific on competitive dialogue? Then just speak out, raise your hand or write in the chat. Or if you have just any comments, it doesn't have to be a question. I'm waiting a few seconds. Otherwise, we have some questions more for a for discussion, even though we already started discussion. But yeah, still, if you come up with new questions or comments, just let us know. Otherwise, I'll share this slide now. Yeah, so now we'll go to the more interactive part or continue the discussion. So we would like to hear from you what you think about the instrument competitive dialogue, as well as its pros and cons, both in general and also specifically for the application for its for NBS procurement in cities. We're also curious to hear your thoughts and ideas regarding the possible use of competitive dialogue in your cities in general and for procuring NBS, like you think could be something that you could start using, if not yet. And also, if you have any cases to share from your cities where you have used this instrument, we invite you to share that as well, further than what has been shared by Leuven and Pilsen already. But maybe we can start with the first question on the slide. So yeah, regarding the technicalities of the instrument competitive dialogue, do you think that the overall presentation was convincing? Do you agree or disagree with the main argument that competitive dialogue can be very beneficial in the local adaptation of NBS? Yeah, we actually heard a little bit of this already, that perhaps Max was not too convinced, but he understood like the answers. Any other person who wants to share something, if you think it was convincing? Do you think it can be beneficial for procurement in general or procurement especially for NBS? A few seconds in case you just need some time to think about it. Otherwise, yes, as we already discussed. Or yeah.
Yeah, just a regular comment there, because I feel that there's a couple of people with a lot of experience in procurement. Yeah, and I think the goal is also well to inform the people who are leading our projects to be more aware of it. But I don't know, I don't know to what extent this is just a regular question, a random question for me. To what extent it would have been, is it the goal to update and inform and build capacity for our just our regular context or our leads, or to what extent would have been interesting to also have somebody from their procurement department's part of this call, or maybe they are already, but then I wasn't aware.
Yeah, no, good question or a good comment. So in the invitation to the cities, we wrote earlier, and then I sent a reminder a bit more than a week ago that we invite the city representatives from URBREATH project to invite their colleagues from their procurement departments. I don't know, actually, I've seen some new names that I haven't seen before, so maybe some of them is actually from a procurement department. If so, feel free to say if you are, but not, I'm not forcing you to. Yeah, that's definitely one ask we have made, and I will send a reminder about it as well. But otherwise, since we're recording it and it will be put on our or URBREATH's YouTube channel, in a follow-up email, I'll also ask the cities that they can share the recording with their procurement colleagues afterwards. So if they couldn't join today, they can watch this afterwards. So yeah, that's definitely an idea, and I hope so that several cities can start using or start implementing some of these innovative approaches to procurement. And that's also something that we're in Southwell working with the report during this autumn, and we'll continuously support the cities on it as well, more concretely. And if not for the pilots, then maybe more for future projects. Okay, I can move on to the second question. If someone thinks about something for the first question, just let us know. Otherwise, the second question is, there I wanted to say that if you specifically reflect on the potential, including the pros and cons or in other words, the benefits and challenges of the competitive dialogue for the sake of NBS. Yeah, well, what do you think is the potential or pros and cons? So you can share it on an application, or I mean, best of course regarding application for procurement of NBS. So yeah, so do you agree or disagree with which items of the list of pros and cons were provided? Or also do you have any additional items to suggest for good and bad? So yeah, I can share that slide again with the pros and cons. Yeah, we already kind of talked a bit about this. I know this just gives you a bit more chance to comment on the pros and cons if you see any further pros and or cons. So I'll give you some moments to read it if you want to read it yourself as a recap. And then think about some questions or comments. Yeah, anyone any thoughts or comments here? I mean, we see it's quite balanced. It's like it's not that like it's super many pros and very few cons, which is like speaking like super much for it, but it's also not that the list of cons is much longer than the list of pros. So I mean, I think it definitely has some benefits, but yeah, it can be good to be aware about the risks or the cons and try to just like work with them to handle them or manage them in some way. Oh yeah, I see a raised hand. Before that, I saw that Powell shared that if he's interested in PCP, which is pre-commercial procurement cities-wise, you can contact him. And yeah, PCP will be, I think, in the 5th webinar otherwise, but I know Powell is a real expert in pre-commercial procurement, so thank you for sharing that. I see that Vaso has raised his hand.
Hello, Sarah. Well, as a general comment, that it is the competitive dialogue is very demanding in terms of organization and capacity. So what happens in Greece is that there's the centralized contracting authority that often carries out this kind of competition for other organizations or for municipalities, because only a few municipalities in Greece can get engaged regarding capacity in such things. Because you need a lot of experts. You need legal experts, you need technical experts. Yes, it is. It has been incorporated in the Greek law about public procurement, but it cannot be always applied.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I guess that's why it's mainly done for more complex projects where it's bigger and then it's worth it, kind of, since it's so much worth it to take in these different experts. But if it's just a smaller project, it might not be worth to make this big effort. So yeah, but there are cases, I guess, where you can make larger, more complex NBS projects, or where NBS is part of like a greening project, like Francesco shared for. Was it the Belgian city where it looked very green, like an eco village, eco city. So there it's not a pure NBS project, but it's NBS part of a bigger thing, and then you could apply this perhaps.
Yes, because it is mainly used for big infrastructure projects that generate income. So you might have something like NBS on the side, but it's not the main scope of the project.
Yeah.
Because it's difficult to quantify the effect of NBS still.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Exactly. I mean, so these 5 instruments we go through, they are like we know that they exist. They come from the EU law, and but it's not necessarily that they are best used for NBS. But we do. That's why we have this discussion, which I think is great, to see. Yeah, is it actually is it relevant to use for NBS or not? And some of these 5 instruments can be more worth using it, but maybe this competitive dialogue, maybe this instrument might not be as relevant for NBS. But because since NBS is somehow in cities is somehow a developing field, it's not too old, like in this more innovative sense. That's why we also need to, it's good to talk about it to see which relevance can be relevant where.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Let me know if someone else wants to say something on the second point. Otherwise, we can go to the third question, since I see we're getting closer to our ending time. So yeah, we want to continue the discussion with you, especially city representatives. But yeah, anyone can contribute. So again, yeah, we if you have any personal experience to share of using competitive dialogue, as we said, yeah, ideally if you use for NBS in cities, but it can be other contexts, like how did it go? Did it go as planned, or did you have any challenges? If you had any challenges, how did you overcome them? Would you recommend other cities to do it? Also, are you more or less convinced of the usefulness and viability of the competitive dialogue now than before the webinar started? Yeah, now we have already touched on this, though this question is not maybe super new, but it just gives you a final chance to say something if you come up with new ideas on the usefulness of this, of competitive dialogue. I don't see anything. Then we might start wrapping up. Otherwise, last chance. Raise your hand or write something. No, but if not, then then I'll stop sharing my screen. And just to say some final words from my side first, then I'll give the chance to Francesco as well. So yeah, thanks a lot for all your contributions and for a good discussion. I think we have a better understanding on the real world application of competitive dialogue now. So yeah, just to share a summary of some insights that I got at least. So we now know more about what competitive dialogue is, if you didn't know it before. One critical point is that non-confidential topics can be shared publicly, including with citizens. However, confidential information from the bidders stay confidential. So the competitive dialogue allows refining the definition of needs, requirements, scope, and budget, but the objectives and award criteria are fixed. So you can't make any transformative changes to the original, say, plan or description, but you can change some things, which gives it good flexibility. We learned a bit about the similarities and differences between competitive dialogue and the PMC. And then, so with the competitive dialogue, we heard that there's an obligation to finalize procedure within a ward. So it needs to lead to an actual procurement. Also, yeah, we heard that competitive dialogue has been mostly used for more complex projects like renovating or building whole areas. So yeah, Francesco, do you want to say any final words from your side before I close today's webinar?
I think we have come to an end. I would also like to thank for the participation. There are 20 people left, which is not obvious after 1 hour and a half. Thanks for joining, and never forget the next morning coffee next Monday at 9 a.m. on the
Exactly.
competitive procedure with negotiation. Thank
Yeah.
you, and a good week. and
Yeah,
day.
exactly. Just some final words just before we close, before you leave. Exactly. So next week, you mentioned that. The week after will be Innovation Partnership. So 20th of October, and on 27th October, we'll go through the pre-commercial procurement. So yeah, as Francesco said, I also, from my side, you would like to join the coming webinars as well to learn about the other innovative approaches to procurement. If you, for any reason, are not able to join, you can watch the recording afterwards. And yeah, the link with more information and to join the meeting is here. I just posted in the chat, especially if you are not from the URBREATH consortium. And yeah, we're happy to connect and collaborate with you if you're not already in contact with us through the URBREATH consortium. So I'm just reposting our email addresses here. Francesco's was in the slide, but here you have my email address as well. Yeah, so I think that was it. So thank you again all for joining, and have a good start of your week, and hopefully see you next week, Monday.
Thank you to Sarah. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yep, thank
Bye.
you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sarah. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good.
I thought we can stay for a minute or two if there's something we want to say. I don't know who Daria is, but I guess Daria is leaving soon. Yeah, I think I went well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we made it.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah, now that I shared the slides, this Q&A didn't come in, but yeah, that's fine. But you can include it for next week. Yeah, so as I said, I plan to write send a reminder in this email chain about the webinar for cities to submit questions or sharing case studies in advance, even though we know not too much might come in. Oh yeah, I see that we're like recording. I guess the recording will stop when we finish. Yeah. But otherwise, yeah, we keep in touch for next week's webinar. And yeah, I don't think there's so much more I thought about. So.
No, it's a good number, no?
It's
a good number. The participants
yeah.
are steadily above 20, so it's interesting, no?
Yeah, I think that's good. I think it's really good. So yeah, I'm happy to see that. And again, yeah, we don't know if anyone is from procurement department or not, but yeah, I'll write in the email that they can share the recordings. So yeah, good. I guess that's it then.
See you soon.
Yeah, good. Take care. See you.
You.
Bye.
Bye.